Welcome back to Sons of Ours podcast. I'm Micah Flores.
And this is Deacon Ian Wintering.
Deacon Ian Wintering.
That's right.
Welcome back to the podcast. I haven't been on in forever either.
Yeah.
But
I don't think
you've had an ontological change since the last time that you've
Yeah.
been on the podcast.
Yeah,
so.
not only has it been a long time, but I was a totally different man before.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we haven't recorded an episode since the lockdown.
No, it's
Because Tony and Machado lifted all
they did the couple episodes right after we got done in quarantine at the seminary,
Right.
and then
Yeah.
they've done the last episode since after the summer,
Right.
when we were all in different places.
But anyway,
but
it's good to be back.
But you've had a big summer. Good
Yeah,
grief.
it was crazy.
Yeah.
Number one, being ordained is something that you'll never forget. That's like getting married. You're never going to forget that day. But on top of that, it was 2020 quarantine with coronavirus.
Yeah.
So that makes it an absolutely unforgettable, good or bad.
Yep.
In that sense. It was just absolute chaos.
Yeah. And I was super grateful because I was one of the few who got to go down.
That's right.
Me, Trevor Lontine, Deacon Sean Conroy, and Owen Lamarta, and then Father John, of course, your formator, were all able to travel down during coronavirus. Well, I mean, it was like when things were calming down quite a bit. And so I think when we had left, restaurants had like just opened up to like 50% capacity,
right? Because
we were able to go to brunch down in Phoenix, and then I think it was about the same for here in Colorado,
right?
But it was awesome.
And the Sunday after I got ordained was when the rioting started.
Oh yeah,
so
that was nuts.
It was just, oh man, there's so much going on.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So we were laughing super hard because all of us from Denver came down, and we were like the only ones who ended up being able to be in the actual ordination mass.
Right.
And like almost all of the Phoenix seminarians were
not able to go. That's right.
Because Ian did us the great honor of putting us in his like friends and family list. Yeah, it was awesome, man. Yeah, my first time down to Phoenix, so it was hot.
Yes.
But yeah, so yeah, it was awesome though, and super happy to see you be ordained.
Yeah.
And it's been pretty cool. So huge grace for me, and I'm just your friend. So.
But yeah, one of the things when Micah and I were planning this episode, so we don't have a guest today. It's just us two. Mm-hmm. And the reason why was because we realized that I have never actually shared my story.
Yep.
Because a while back, Micah and I think it was like the second episode, we both recorded us sharing our stories, but mine had to be cut. And we kept like part of yours or something like that.
Yeah, I don't even remember either.
But yeah, so
I think we just scratched that episode all together.
We might have, yeah.
Because then I shared a little bit later when I talked a little bit about study too, and how it can be integrated into
that makes sense. Yeah.
Prayer and the spiritual life.
But yeah, so this whole time we've been bringing seminarians on to tell their stories, and I was like, I haven't told mine. So plus I'll share a little bit of the graces that came from ordination too.
Yeah, of course. But, so your long-awaited curiosity about who actually is Deacon Ian Wintering.
Right.
Well, before Ian Wintering, but now Deacon Ian Wintering. We've been calling him Draconian.
Yeah. That is an invention of Father Nathan Goebel from
I wanted to
Catholic
call him Deaconin, because I think we talked about this. All the Myanmar guys used to call you Ian. And so as soon as it happened, I was like, oh, Deaconin. And I was like, Deaconin is Deaconin.
Right. That's really corny.
Which I was planning on saying a lot more, but then Draconian ended up being a lot cooler. So my lame joke got put to the side, and Draconian became the actual fun thing. So yep. Yeah, but so Deacon Ian Draconian is going to share a little bit of his story, and I'm pretty excited. He's got a good story.
Yeah.
So you grew up in Phoenix, Arizona. the suburb starts with a G.
Gilbert.
Gilbert.
The Gilbert
Yep.
area. Chandler Gilbert area. Yeah. So we when I was a child, we actually were in more of the Tempe Chandler area, but as we grew up, we kind of moved further south and east. So
yeah, because I mean the city was probably expanding too.
Right. Yeah.
And
Like I don't even think Gilbert existed. I mean Gilbert, the city was there, but it was all farmland when I was a kid. Now it's all developed suburbs. So
yeah, I was talking to this one dude this one Knight of Columbus not a dude, but this guy. I felt weird calling him a dude because he's a older gentleman who I need to have a little bit more respect for. But he was talking about, he grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, and so we were talking about all the suburbs and how the city started growing and everything. But yeah.
Yeah,
so.
It was rapid expansion, basically.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, so I grew up in the suburbs, and our family was always Catholic.
Yep.
But it was more of kind of this Irish Catholic where you go to Mass on Sunday, you pray a rosary when somebody's dying.
No knock on all you Irish Catholics out there. We love and respect you guys so much.
I am one, so.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was there. Yeah, again, it was, Sunday Mass, rosary if somebody was dying or if, there was some sort of tragedy or whatever, and then confession once a year. And that was pretty much the extent of my faith growing up.
Right. It's like, what does the catechism say we got to do, like bare minimum almost?
Right. And it wasn't so much like, oh, we don't believe or we're trying to do as little as we can. It was more of just the faith wasn't anything more than that. There wasn't more.
So that's part of it. Is like a lot of times we grow up and we don't actually know that there's more to discover here.
Exactly. Right.
Because we go through Sunday school and we probably hear the same kind of 3 or 4 stories every year that are just kind of repeated. And then the Sunday Mass homily is, I don't know.
Well, I was never paying attention.
Exactly. I wasn't.
We were always playing games, like hand games, or we would do this thing where during the homily, my brothers, if we could manage to sit next to each other without our parents separating us, we would write a word with our fingers on our brother's back, and they would have to try to guess the word that we're spelling. And I remember, for some reason, this is such a distinct memory, and it's probably not even that funny, but my brother was drawing on my back the letters big BIGHAT. I'm like, big hat.
What the heck?
And I look forward, and about 3 rows in front of us is a woman wearing one of those, it was one of those black, the red and white Dr. Seuss hats. And I just bursted out laughing. I was like, what the heck?
And then Dad hits you on the arm. He's like, shut up.
Yeah, no, for us, it was always, if we did not behave during the hour-long Mass, we would have to spend an hour in our room in silence to make up for it. So, yeah, I learned my lesson quickly.
Now you spend an hour in silence every day.
Right. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was, life teen kind of Catholic, like growing up with kind of this very minimalist idea of what the faith should be in my life, right? And it wasn't until high school that things started to change. So mostly because of the fact that I went to a Catholic high school. So, and this was a miracle in a sense, because I was never good at schooling. With the exception of like kindergarten, 1st, 2nd grade, I was always on like the A honor roll. And we'd always get like McDonald's ice cream at the end of each semester because I was on the A honor roll. But
wait, during those first 3 years or during the
during 1st grade, 2nd grade, and 3rd grade.
So you were really good with Elmer's glue.
Oh yes, definitely.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was great.
And
but as
fun
soon
feathers and all sorts of cool different. You're a crafts guy. No, just kidding.
No, it was. I just was good at being smart as a child.
Yeah.
But as soon as I got into maybe 5th or 6th grade is when I really started to struggle in school.
Okay.
So I'm more like a C, B, C kind of student, more emphasis on the C than the B. And so when I applied, my parents came time for high school, my parents wanted to send me to Catholic high school just because they knew the education would be a good education.
Yep.
Well, when I applied, I didn't make it because my grades weren't good enough or whatever. There was other people that were able to get in before me. So I was really actually distraught when I knew that I didn't get accepted. There was something in me, and I don't even really know why, but there was something in me that really wanted to go to Catholic high school. But so part of the miracle was that, so knowing that I wasn't getting accepted there, what that meant was that I would have to go to Hamilton High School, which was the public high school in the Chandler area. And my older brother, who was 3 years older than me, went there for 3 of his 4 years of high school. And he just didn't have a good experience there. And so I was not looking forward to that. Like, I remember crying when my dad told me.
Oh, dang.
But then something, maybe my parents would know more of the actual logistics of what happened.
Yeah.
But from what I understand, I was far down the waiting list. Because when you don't get accepted, you're automatically put onto a waiting list. Okay. So I don't know, I was like 10 or 15th in line or whatever.
Yeah.
But basically what happened is all the people in front of me, there's, maybe a couple of guys who were initially accepted who couldn't go.
Right.
Well, so they start asking down the list, and apparently all the people that were in front of me in line didn't end up going. They denied it or weren't able to go. So I was accepted as somebody that was like 15th on the waiting list. And so that was just really an awesome moment when I realized I'm going to go to Seton Catholic High School.
Yeah.
It was great. So basically what happened was, again, just my faith wasn't really a priority in my life. And I never really was a rebel rouser or a bad kid. So what that meant was I was just kind of present. I did my thing.
Just kind of slid by.
I wasn't really getting in trouble. Yeah, it was just.
It's like you weren't in trouble, but
I wasn't happy either. I felt very unfulfilled, but my sophomore year, or maybe my junior year, I can't remember, Seton Catholic got their first chaplain. Or they might have had a chaplain before, but there was a vacancy.
Right.
And so I believe it was my junior year, we got our first chaplain, and he was a young priest. He was ordained, I think, only 3 years at that point.
Yep.
And his name was Father Will Schmidt.
Oh, Father Will.
Right. Which he also has a podcast called Northern Fathers. Check it out. It's great. Anyway, he's up in Flagstaff. That's why it's called that. But anyway.
Yeah, we got to hang out with him a bunch
he's great.
During the ordination weekend. So it was great getting to meet him finally after hearing you talk about him so much.
Right.
So.
But yeah, so this was like to kind of put you from where I'm coming from with this. This was the first priest I ever met that was under the age of 50. That wasn't an older priest.
Yep.
This was the first priest that I met that was normal. This is the first priest that was cool, that was hip, that was like, whoa, you don't have to be like a weird monastic monk to be a priest. I didn't know that.
Right.
That's really cool. And so I really got to know him. And he was so excellent at, number one, being patient with the students, but number two, just very slowly guiding you towards a deeper connection with your faith. Mm-hmm. And one of the flashpoints, if you will, where things really started getting rolling was a Kairos Retreat that the high school holds every year. And if you're not familiar with Kairos Retreat, it's basically a Cursillo retreat for kids in high school. And there's aspects of it.
They definitely have them at Mullen and Regis. I don't know if Matchbuff does it, but yeah, they're pretty popular.
And it's hard to explain because there are some aspects of the retreat that are meant to be secret,
right? With
some surprise reveals and things. So I don't want to share too much about it, but it wasn't a praise and worship life teen retreat. It's more of internal contemplation retreat. And for high schoolers, this is like a new thing. Like what?
Yeah.
Like what we can pray in silence. That's like, this is different, you know? And it was my first real encounter with God.
Yeah.
And I fell in love.
Mm-hmm.
Like I wanted more. There was a thirst. There was just a part of that thirst that was quenched just a little bit, just enough for me to want more. And part of my experience was growing up, I wanted nothing more than to get married and to have children.
Yeah.
Even as a child, I remember having dreams of raising my own son and teaching him how to play baseball. There's just something about, I was in love with the idea of love, right?
And fatherhood, it sounds like.
Right, yeah. And what happened was when I went on this retreat, it was the first time that the Lord suggested priesthood to me. And I wanted none of it. It was a great experience, the retreat itself.
Right.
But that aspect of it shocked me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was hard to kind of deal with that. And the way Kairos works is it's always, at least at Seton, it was the juniors who go on retreat. And then the juniors that went on retreat would then the next year as seniors lead it for the next year's seniors.
Same with Regis
right.
and Mullen.
And so they asked me to lead the retreat that next year, which I was glad to do. But again, I was still kind of wrestling with this. I really want more. I'm thirsting for God, but this priesthood thing, what is
right?
This?
It's like if I enter back into prayer, then God might bring that up again.
Right, exactly. So there was this kind of fear going into it. And basically what happened was my senior year, I led this retreat, and at some point during the retreat, you do what they call an hour of silence. So, which for me now is literally every day. But as a high schooler, this is the first time I've ever been like...
It's like, what am I going to do with all this time?
Right.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like in adoration. It wasn't before the Blessed Sacrament. It was just go out. We're in the middle of the woods in northern Arizona. So it's like go out and just be by yourself in silence with you and God for an hour. And to be a good leader, I went out and participated. I did, I wasn't going to stay back and do some meetings behind the scenes or anything. Like I actually wanted to go pray and just be a good leader. And I remember sitting by the lake, and the thoughts of priesthood kept coming up, and I was getting so angry. But the primary thought that kept coming to me is, Jesus, I love you. I know that you're real. I've experienced this. And then he would say, look at my apostles, Peter, James, John, all of the 12 or the 11. They gave their life because they loved me and they knew that I was real.
Mm-hmm.
And the question implicitly in that was, am I willing to do that same thing?
Yeah.
If this thing is so real, if this guy named Jesus really did die and this actually has meaning, am I willing to go to the same extent that these guys did? Right.
Right.
And it was devastating because the answer is I have to be willing to.
Yeah.
Otherwise it doesn't mean anything. Right.
Right.
And so that kept coming up, and along with that was priesthood. But I didn't want it. And so here's kind of the funny part of the story. It's really corny, so get ready. But I decided I'd make a bet with God. So I'm sitting on the edge of this lake, and I hear this duck quacking in the distance, which there's a lot of, shrubbery, so I can't see it yet, but I know that there's a duck nearby. So I said, all right, God, for the rest of this half hour, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to wait. And if this duck floats across this pond and there's ducklings behind it, I'm called to marriage and I'm going to pursue it. If there's no ducklings, I will consider the possibility that maybe I might be called to priesthood. I'll think about it. So I sat there for a half an hour and I waited and I waited and I waited. There was no ducklings. That duck floated across the pond. There was no ducklings.
Uh-oh.
I lost it. I mean, I couldn't handle the truth.
Right.
And there's this great moment. I walked away from that moment very angry at God because it wasn't what I wanted. I thought my whole life you've given me this desire for marriage, for being a father. And now you're telling me this doesn't make sense.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, early on, like this is kind of what we think too, is like, is that we shouldn't have these desires if we're called to be a priest, or that God won't fulfill those natural desires of our hearts in any way if we say yes to becoming a priest. But,
right.
And then, but then as we go on, and like, especially in seminary, just knowing the depth of what the priesthood actually means, spiritual fatherhood actually means, and the spousal relationship that God is calling us to, our own hearts.
Right.
And I mean, our whole idea of intimacy and our whole idea of friendship just completely gets blown out of the water, you know, and continues to expand. But I mean, we don't know that when we're in high school. When God makes the ask, or when he puts that first desire for the priesthood on our heart, or not desire, but calls us, like that initial call.
Right.
And
but what happened was, because I was so angry, at the end of the retreat, they have everybody go up. It's voluntary, so you don't have to do it, but if you feel so called, you can go up and you can share your experience of the hour of silence.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so angry at God that I went up and I told everybody that I was called to marriage. I straight up lied to everybody because that was what I wanted.
Yeah.
And I didn't care what God wanted for me anymore.
Yeah.
And so for 3 years of my life after that, I ran from my vocation. Well, more like 2 years, but my whole college experience, because my plan was I loved film, the film industry. I was good at it. I'm going to college to become a filmmaker.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to be my plan. And I'll get married and I'll have tons of kids and it'll be great. Well, the Lord wasn't done. I didn't have the last word. And what happened was I started to feel that emptiness again before my encounter with God, where that thirst was not being quenched. I was in film school, and again, I loved it. I loved film. I loved making movies. I loved participating in all this stuff. But there was a moment where it's a secular college, and one of our projects as a freshman at this college, at this film school, was we had to make a PSA, a public service announcement video. But we had to do it as a class.
Yeah. And
so we as a class submit ideas for what public service announcement do we want to make, as the freshman class, getting our feet wet with filmmaking.
Mm-hmm.
Well, our class almost unanimously decided to make a PSA announcement on condoms.
Oh my gosh.
And it was that and a couple other experiences similar to that where I realized, I don't know if I can do this.
Right. This is going to be messy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there is another film that one of the guys, that it was a class project that we wanted to make, and there was a pretty explicit scene in it. And our names had to be on the credits because we were participating. And I was like, I can't have my name on this. I can't do this.
Yeah.
But then there was a moment where I was asked to be part of the little short film that we were making. And I didn't know what it was. I didn't know the premise yet. But all of a sudden the teacher said, okay, we need somebody to play the part of a priest, a Catholic priest in this short. Hey, Ian, why don't you do it? You seem like you would make a good priest. He's not even Catholic. This is just some secular film professor.
Did he even know you were?
No. It's just like, yeah, you look like the kind of guy that would make a good priest. I was like, what?
Dang it. What the heck?
Right.
Coming from all angles.
So here I am on this secular university campus where we're filming this movie. I'm dressed up in clerics, which I don't know how the heck they got a hold of clerical attire, but
yeah.
So I'm dressed up in clerics, and when we're filming, it's like, oh, that makes sense. People walk by and they're like, oh, there's cameras. This is a movie. They're filming it. He's probably not a real priest. But then we would take breaks between the filming, and I would just be walking around campus wearing a collar. And there was something about the looks that people gave me that converted my heart. I started to see the world through the eyes of what a priest sees.
Yeah.
The brokenness, the emptiness, the thirst. There was something. It was a grace-filled moment.
Wow.
There was also some of the snarls and
of course.
Right. And it was just like, wow, this is what a priest goes through every day. This is what he sees. This is incredible. Like, I want to love these people. I want them to know God.
Mm-hmm.
So I met up with my long-lost friend, Father Will Schmidt.
Gosh, it's about time you...
Exactly. No, that's exactly what happened. I went to him and I was like, Father Will, I think I might be crazy, but I think I might be called to priesthood. He's like, it's about time. My goodness. And so this was about September.
Again, his patience.
Right. Patience very much came into play. But this was about September, which means that coming semester of seminary had already started. So there was no chance I could apply like right away. So he's like, yeah, it's about time. I've known this for a while. I was just waiting, and the Lord's done something to move your heart, and I think you're ready. Unfortunately, you're too late to jump in the door right now. But the vocations director and I have been working on a program for guys in this exact situation. So he pulled out a huge, thick stack of paper, which initially I was like, that better not be the application to seminary because that is massive. It turns out the application to seminary is actually thicker. It's actually a much larger. But anyway, that's beside the point. This documentation was a program that our vocations director and Father Will had put together for seminarians to shadow a priest for a year, or guys that are prospective seminarians.
Right.
So basically what we would call a pastoral year, where I got to live with Father Will. I got to shadow him for an entire year.
Serve mass.
Which most seminarians don't even get that before they come into seminary. So that was such a privilege to be able to experience, to see the good, to see the bad days, to see the beautiful days. I'd never served mass before. This was the first time I was even in the sanctuary in my whole life. It was just crazy. And everything moved so fast. It was just such an awesome experience. Yeah, I think, and he would wake me up in the middle of the night to go on sick calls. So I got, again, the good and the bad. It was so beautiful. And by the end of that year, I was like, this is it. I got to do this. And so I started the application process, which again, they say the application process is about as complicated and convoluted as applying for the Marines or to be a police officer or something. It's a lot as far as background checks and psychological evaluations.
Actually,
yeah.
Most,
other than
most of what's required by armed forces.
Right. Other than the actual physical training, but
right, yeah.
But yeah, it was a long process.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think I started the application process when I moved in, and I don't think I was accepted until about a month before I entered seminary that next year. So
yeah, I started in October and then had my last interview the following May.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it was, that whole time. So
yeah, it's a lot, but it was so great. And I didn't really know what I was doing, but it ended up being a really beautiful journey. Yeah. So I spent 3 years at the Josephinum in Columbus, Ohio for college seminary. It was only 3, normally it's 4 years, but I managed to transfer some of the film credits for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. So I was able to knock off a year of the philosophy program. And then after I graduated there, I did the spirituality year here in Denver. And then 3 years of theology. Now I'm 4th theology deacon.
Yeah. Yeah, man, it's wild. I mean, what I was thinking of as you were sharing your story was you said you immediately thought of the apostles on the initial call, and you saw them and you saw how they had given everything. They had given up their whole life, right? And it's, I mean, looking back on it now, it's like what immediately came to mind was Archbishop's homily for Deacon Julius.
That's right.
Right. And he said, unless you're willing to be martyred, then you're not ready yet to be ordained. Yeah. And it's like, wow. It's crazy. And it's super, like it's scary, of course, the first time that it comes to our mind when we realize, like, if we really love God and if we really are going to believe and know that he is who he says he is, and who like we've been taught to believe he is, like the source of all goodness, the creator of everything. And it's like, then everything that I've been given is a gift, and it only makes sense that I'm giving it back to him. Right. And it's crazy, right? And we look at the scripture, and we look at all the different moments where people have been called, and you have such a broad spectrum of, right? It's like, you see all the apostles, they each have their own unique individual call. And then you also have the people who are called who didn't respond. Right. The rich man who went away sad. Right. And it's like, that's one, I was thinking about that today. That's one of the most painful things that I think I've experienced as I've gone on through my walk, is knowing friends, seeing them be called, and then walking away sad. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I've had one friend who basically told me, he's like, I saw what you'd have to give up, and I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, it's like he equated everything with like that we experience in the world with happiness, and it was basically
right.
And he's like, I can't give all that up.
Right.
And I was like, oh my gosh, like that's exactly the story of the rich man who wasn't able to give up his possessions. Right. And but yeah.
And I went through that same thing.
Right.
3 years.
Yeah.
I walked away sad.
Yeah. And this is the best part, right? Is that even if you walk away sad, God still seeks after you.
Yep.
And he continues to call, and he continues to pour out his grace into our lives and into our hearts. Because I've walked away sad. I've realized what's at stake, and I still continue to do while I'm in seminary. There's so many moments where because the call gets deeper, right? And we realize that we think we've given everything that we possibly could give, and then the Lord continues to bring up more, And each time it's like the same thing. It's like, man, Lord, like what you want that too? It's like I don't know if I'm ready for that, know. But yeah, and it's the beautiful process of receiving the vocation that God has for us. So,
and the biggest thing too that I would say is that the number one obstacle is that fear, right? So that fear of what it takes to give, what you're going to have to give up for this vocation. And that fear is so consuming. It's so easy to give into it. And I remember there was a conversation I had with one of the professors that was at the high school. He was a theological professor. Dan Nguyen was his name, which you met his brother when you were down in Phoenix, Father Vincent Nguyen.
Oh, yeah.
So his older brother was a professor at the high school. And we were on some mission trip. This was after I graduated. We went on a mission trip to Gallup, New Mexico. And he just happened to be on it. And I was like, hey, that's cool to see you. But I remember him bringing up and saying, have you ever thought about priesthood? And this was after I already rejected him and was running from it. Mm-hmm. But Dan is not the kind of guy you lie to. He sees straight through it. So I knew I had to be honest in this moment. And so I said, yes, I have. But honestly, I don't want it. And I'd rather not think about it till after I graduate, after I get my degree, after I get what I want. Mm-hmm. And being the choleric kind of brick wall that he is, he basically said, why? Why would you wait?
Yeah.
If God is calling you, if God's calling you right now, why would you wait? If he's calling you now, you respond. Mm-hmm. And I said, it's because I'm afraid.
Yeah.
It's afraid of what priesthood is. It's afraid of what I would have to give up. And then he came with another brilliant response. He said, well, yeah, if you weren't afraid, I would be concerned. It's totally normal.
Right.
But whatever you do going forward, never make a decision out of fear. For fear is not the tool of God. It is a tool of the devil.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just didn't have a response to that.
Yeah.
It broke the logic fortress that I had built up to protect me from this vocation of priesthood.
Right. Yeah.
And he shattered it.
Yeah.
And I just had no choice at that point,
Yeah.
In the freest sense possible.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But so for those of you who have that calling, who feel it, the Lord has put that on your heart and in your prayer. Do not let your fear be the guiding decision in your life.
Yeah. I mean, so it's going to be that for every vocation too, right? So it's whether you're feeling like you're called to be a priest, whether you're feeling like you're called to marriage, whether you're feeling like you're called to religious life, to be a consecrated man or woman in the world, there's always going to be some amount of fear, because every vocation that we pursue is going to have a weightiness to it, and there's going to be like a heaviness because of the dignity that we have as human beings and the glory that God is calling us to. He's calling us, he's elevating us to something so much greater than that we think that we are capable of or that is possible in our lives.
Right.
And that's scary, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's also pretty incredible and exciting at the same time. Yeah. There's the classic really maybe overused quote from Pope Benedict that we're not made for comfort, we're made for greatness. Right. And I mean, that comes back to mind a lot when I'm thinking about vocation, because like that greatness can be intimidating sometimes.
Right.
So
speaking of greatness, Tony Davis. Tony Davis.
Hey, Tony.
So Mike and Ian thought they were sly recording in our community basement, and we're trying to watch the Nuggets game at some point. So
don't worry, we're almost done.
Let's go Nuggets.
Sorry, Jacob and I had a bet who could crash the party first, and I hope I won, but I have no idea.
Yeah, you definitely won.
I was waiting for it. I was like, okay, both of them know, and they're gonna come down here at some point.
Definitely.
So
absolutely. Speaking of which, Jacob and I are recording some great episodes for you all this week, so stay tuned to the real Sons of Ours podcast.
It's okay if you're the real one. We're the original.
You are the original.
Oh, gee. We're the same podcast. What's going on here? Why are we bringing division? That's funny.
Yeah. But so that was my story leading up to ordination. It was
right. Yeah. And it is cool. It's cool to be where you are now and to see how much God has done and how he guides us in his perfect providence. So, and to look back and this has happened for me at least, is as we get further on, it's like we look back on so many of these graces that God has given us and realize just how powerful they've been. When we go, like, can you imagine thinking about going on that Kairos retreat, knowing what we know now, or knowing what you know now, and realizing that there's going to be a moment on that retreat that forever changes the course and direction of your life.
Yeah.
Who would have ever thunk?
Right. I probably wouldn't have gone.
Yeah, and there's tons of other moments that have kind of contributed to it, but it's so incredible how important our memory is in the Christian life, and how important it is to constantly recall these graces, and how much these graces have come up in different difficult moments in seminary and difficult moments in college, and they've been the font of grace that's continued to sustain us to continue to pursue what God has in store for us,
right,
and his will for our life. Oh, and it's so exciting knowing that this is only the beginning, right? For you, like you were just ordained, like it's time for the mission, baby. You know, like it's like this is it's what we've been preparing for, and it's what we've originally been called to. Like, we weren't called to seminary.
Right.
It felt like you were called to the priesthood, right?
Right.
And still kind of having that same daunting feeling, like the priesthood is coming. I'm not really actually prepared,
right.
All these fears, like I'm not worthy. I'm not, I just, how am I going to actually, you're scared that we're not going to be able to be faithful through all the difficult moments. But we just remember that God has already brought us all the way up into this present day. Right. What we thought was impossible when we were in high school, God has continually shown that he's not outdone in generosity.
Right.
And that's what's so exciting is we're living now, and the hope of the Christian is that we're living with the anticipation of the goodness that is still yet to come.
Right.
And that's not even talking about the heavenly reality, right? Where beyond what we can ever imagine is going to be offered to us. So it's so awesome. So it's
Yeah, it was that was one of the big things with the ordination was, it's really with any aspect of the Christian life, as soon as you start moving in a direction that is of God's will, the devil's going to be working double time.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
To steer you off course. And that was the biggest thing that I noticed, was just so much anxiety leading up to the ordination, which I'm sure any married man could probably say the same thing about their wedding day, right? The anxiety, the doubt, the fear that comes in where it's like, you are not worthy.
Yeah.
But there's just this great moment where I realized, yeah, you're right.
I'm not
worthy. Never will be. I'm a piece of crap. But the Lord chose me anyway.
Yeah.
And there's something really powerful and really freeing in that. That was my favorite part. One of my favorite parts of the ordination was the man who's called as a candidate for the diaconate or for priesthood, whatever ordination it is. The vocations director, your boss, essentially.
Yeah, or someone
right.
representing the seminary or
right.
the archdiocese.
He goes up to the ambo and he says, would Ian Wintering, who is being called to the diaconate, please come forward? You stand up and you say present. And the vocations director will say, on behalf of, after inquiry with the Christian faithful, or no, it was the bishop responds first, do you know him to be worthy?
Yeah.
And the vocations director, he looked me right in the eye and said, after inquiry with the Christian faithful and the church, we have found this man to be worthy. Mm-hmm. It was such a powerful moment. There is no aspect of my life that man does not know.
Yeah. Yeah.
All of my failures, all of every crappy decision I've ever made in my life.
Yeah.
He knows it. And yet the church has still said, God chooses you anyway.
Yeah.
I love the line. I mentioned it in a homily at the seminary the other day, which is like an adaptation of John Paul II, but you are not the sum of your sins, but you are the sum of God's mercy for you and in your life.
Yeah.
Which is just so powerful. It's not about being perfect. It's not about being sinless. It's not about, you are broken. You are crappy. You are going to fail so many times. But the Lord loves you, and that grace and that mercy, that is where your identity is.
Right.
And he has chosen me, even though, I am a sinner.
Yeah.
And it was just a great affirmation to receive that from the church. And like, at that point, it's like, what can the devil do?
Right.
He's got to attack me by some other means now, because he's not going to shake that confidence of that moment.
Yeah. Yeah. And so St. John Paul II quote goes, you are not the sum of your weaknesses and failures. You are the sum of the Father's love and your real capacity to become the image of his Son. Mm-hmm. And what I just wanted to add to what you said is a lot of times we there can be this mindset. Luther kind of talks about this, is that we're a piece of crap, and then God showers his grace upon us and kind of covers all of our crap, but that crap still kind of stays there.
Wrong.
Yeah. And it's like, no, God realizes where we're at, and he doesn't just leave us there. He picks us up out of the muck, out of the crap of our lives, out of our sins, our failures, what we think defines us, and he elevates us and lifts us up and transforms us. Mm-hmm. So much so that when he looks upon us after our baptism, after our confession, that he no longer just sees us, but he sees his Son, Jesus Christ. Right. And
behold, I make all things new.
Yeah. And so not only, it's like, okay, I realize I'm a piece of crap, but God calls us beyond it, and he transforms it.
Yep.
He transforms it. And so it can be easy to just stay and dwell in that, man, like can't do anything right, but realizing, living out of the hope that we were talking about, that no, like God is going to do something great, is doing something great. And, and that's the other part, right, of the ordination, that God, what's the line?
May God, who has begun the good work in you, bring it to fulfillment.
Right.
Yeah, that's right after the man has been ordained, or maybe right before.
Yeah.
But it's after you've made the promises to the bishop.
Yeah, so it's right before you're officially
ordained.
Right. And that's powerful. The God is doing good work.
And will continue to. It doesn't say, may God, who did the good work, or I don't know, how would you make that present? So, like, thank God who has done the good work in you and has brought it to fulfillment. That's not what he says.
Yeah. May he bring it to fulfillment.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And so, so even for those who are called to marriage, realize this and make this known to your spouse, whether it's your husband or your wife, that when you look them in the eye and you say, I do, like, I pray God that it's that same moment that Ian had with the vocations director in the church, where the church realizes everything about Deacon Ian and says, you are worthy. I choose you anyways. You know, and I just pray that every married couple could have that same experience, that when they look into each other's eyes and say, I know where you've been. I know what you've done. I know how you've hurt me, you know,
right.
But I choose you anyways. Yeah. Because what's more freeing than, I mean, that's our identity right there, you know? And I mean, beyond your identity is not just the love that your spouse has for you, but
right.
Yeah.
We get the point.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that's the freedom of the sons of God right there, you know.
Of the sons of ours.
Yeah. Praise God. I'm just so grateful now for the friendship that God has given us, and to see my friend become ordained.
Yeah.
And,
praise the Lord.
Yeah. So God is full of surprises. And continues to be. So.
Which before we close, we have to mention. Do you remember the SY guy's name?
Oh, Michael. Yeah, Michael
so
from Pueblo, Colorado.
Had our first vocation that we know of from the podcast.
Yeah, so I was in the library the other day, and Michael, I was talking to him. He was on the computer, and I said, "Hey, what's up, man?" Because I had talked to him like once or twice at the camping trip, and we talked about, I don't know, like the day at SY or something. And he was like, "What's your name again?" I was like, "Oh, I'm Micah." And he goes, "What? Really?" He's like, "Micah, like, are you the one from Sons of Ours?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah." I was like, and he's like, "Yeah, man, thank you so much for doing that podcast, because that just helped me so much last year when I was discerning coming here, and just hearing all the stories of some of the guys in seminary made it so much less intimidating." And I just like felt like I had more freedom to come.
Which was the purpose of this podcast, so that worked out.
Yeah, and so we're just really grateful to have you with us, Michael. If you listen to this podcast, I don't know if you will. So it's great to have you in seminary with us now, Michael, in the SY, and we look forward to getting to know you. Yeah. So, but yep. It's been a pleasure being back on.
Yes,
I'm excited to continue recording throughout this semester, throughout this year. And yeah.
You have been listening to Sons of Ours podcast.
That's ours with
an A. Booyah!
Woo!
See you later.
Bye-bye.